funny anecdote I like to use a lot of times is we don't put brakes on a car for our car to go slow. We put brakes on our car so our car can go fast, right? And I think from an AI perspective, it's really understanding that speed, right? Because it's just random speed, like you're not making progress.
Hi everyone, Claire here, one of the producers of All Aboard, the podcast from ConductorOne where we explore the future of cybersecurity. No fluff, no talking points, just straight talk from experts and advice for tackling the toughest problems facing companies today. In today's episode, our host, Alex Bovee, sits down with ConductorOne's Field CISO Kevin Paige. With over 30 years of security experience, spanning the Department of Defense, Salesforce, Flexport, and now the identity frontier, Kevin brings a sharp, no-nonsense lens to one of the most pressing topics in tech, Agentic AI. The two dive into the real risks, the hype versus the reality, and why the explosion of AI agents is putting massive pressure on traditional identity and access controls. Plus, Kevin shares why brakes are what let us go fast, how humans still have a critical role to play, and what CISOs need to be thinking about today, not 5 years from now. So whether you're a CISO navigating the future of identity, or you're just curious about how real-world security leaders are thinking about AI, this episode is packed with insights and the occasional laugh. Let's get to it.
Kevin, glad to have you on officially. First time on the All Aboard podcast, ConductorOne. Since joining ConductorOne as Field CISO, but tell us a little about yourself and what got you to here.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, first off. Yeah, a quick little background on me is I've got about 30 years of experience in security. So long time. I've kind of worked in lots of different sectors. I started out working in the Department of Defense. So I was active duty in the Air Force. Then I continued on when I got out of the Air Force and was civil service employee for the Army, focused on cybersecurity initiatives. And then kind of as I kept progressing, I really wanted to work in the Bay Area. I really wanted to work in the startup space. Then I left the government after about probably 16, 17 years working in the government, and then started working with startups. I worked with a first company. It was a little startup called X Matters. They were kind of like a PagerDuty competitor. Back in the day, focused more on enterprises. They got acquired by Everbridge. I'm really focused on disaster recovery and reducing mean time to resolution on issues. Then I went to Salesforce and kind of built out Salesforce's first infrastructure security function, kind of helped them grow. I went to MuleSoft, super hyper growth at MuleSoft, was their first CISO. Went to Flexport as their first CISO, another super hyper growth company focused in the logistics world. And then when I left Flexport, I just wanted to do something a little bit different than being a CISO and being a security engineer internally to companies. I wanted to get out and, kind of use my knowledge and experience to help kind of grow and help other people. So that's kind of led me to working at another cybersecurity company called Optics. And then now that brought me to ConductorOne to really kind of help and focus on what I think is the biggest threat vector in cybersecurity, which is identity and access management.
Awesome. Yeah. And glad to have you here. Super, super excited to have you on the journey with us. Obviously, when I loved about chatting with you when we were talking, it was like not only your mix of kind of understanding like where the industry's going, but also obviously you've been in the trenches and have built and procured a lot of these tools and had to be responsible for big security programs. And, unless you've got a head in the sand, for the last year plus, Agentic AI and AI is kind of all over the place. And I think this is a little bit where we're going to focus the episode today, was talking about what are some of the security issues, risks, concerns there from a practitioner standpoint, because I think that's super interesting, super relevant to folks that are out there today. Like the world feels wild west right now around Agentic AI. So I guess, jumping into it, you've probably been digging in a little bit to the space, but maybe share some thoughts on like, where are we today? What are some of the biggest risks that you see? And let's just start there. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we really have to think about, from an AI perspective, some of the biggest things we need to think about, especially as we start thinking about agentic AI, is kind of a major shift in, traditional AI and machine learning, right? And it's the big shift is, right, how these systems are operating, how they're interacting, and how they can potentially cause harm, because there's new attack surfaces now. And whenever there's new technologies, that I've kind of watched over the course of my, 30 years in security and technology is as soon as there's a new technology, you don't know what's coming. And then emergence happens, right? And you constantly get these new things that come up, based on emergence. I mean, you don't really know what to expect. And it's a constant game of learning. I think one of the biggest new attack surfaces is probably this idea of autonomy, right? And I think that I don't really know how everybody's thinking about it yet, right? But, from an autonomy perspective, right, we are letting agentic AI, kind of acting independently to achieve goals, and people are asking questions and they're getting answers. And, sometimes those answers are unpredictable, right? Sometimes the scope of data that it has access to isn't good. Sometimes the quality of the data is not good. Sometimes the third parties that it's pulling information from aren't good. I read an article this morning that was pretty interesting. It was a developer, and he was troubleshooting an issue in his code using AI to help troubleshoot it. And he said like the agentic AI that he was using to troubleshoot his code seemed to get tired. It stopped giving him quality answers and responses back. He reached this level of, I think in the article, he called it, this like tiredness, or, kind of reached the end of what the agent was able to give him. And then he swapped over to another agent, asked questions a little bit differently, and then got to his solution. I think it was pretty interesting to realize that hey, he ran out, based on the LLM he was using, and how he was using it and the way he was asking his questions. He actually, ran out of the ability for it to help him troubleshoot those issues that he was having in code. And I think this thing of autonomy, I think, is like super, super interesting, and I think that we're going to see a lot of emergence here as that happens. And this autonomy and this autonomous way in which things are going to operate, I think is going to be interesting. And then I think if from a risk perspective, then we take a look at other things that have been around for a while, but are starting to get pretty interesting. Whether we're talking about deepfakes, we're talking about this ability to get really, really good with phishing attacks and social engineering based attacks, I think is pretty interesting, right? And then of course, there's going to be tons of regulatory, I think, and compliance areas here that are going to cause additional risk, where we're going to get fines and other issues as we start to figure out AI and we start to deal with this emergent capabilities, and we start to figure out how to really secure AI holistically. I think it's going to be a journey as things keep going, but those are kind of some of the things that I'm thinking about as we look at it.
Yeah. And one of the, all that resonates with me. One of the things that I'm kind of interested in, not just from like a building a company standpoint, but also just sort of AI everything. And then there's the reality and the truth on the ground of like what people are able to adopt to get done reasonably at scale. What does an actual corporate environment look like, and like how are people using agentic AI and LLMs and other things? And I'm definitely not in the camp of AI is like overhyped, because I think AI is real. I think it's a massive change. It's really going to impact how everyone does business. But I think, truth be told, I think people are projecting forward a little bit, like where they're actually at and using LLMs and AI versus like what the truth on the ground is. Like, everyone's saying they're like, one-shotting creating Salesforce CRM. It's like, come on, guys. Like, it's like I don't totally believe it. Like, it can get pretty good at some things, but like, come on a little bit. So I guess, I don't know, any anecdotes or like ground truth that you've been getting from industry and friends and just people you've talked to around, like, how are people actually adopting it today? What does it actually look like? What's the ground truth in terms of like what people are doing and like really worried about with regard to that ground truth?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that level, and the reality of it is changing very quickly every single day, right? It's definitely people are doing things faster, right? And sometimes faster is good, sometimes faster is bad when it comes to automation and the things you're doing, right? Like, I was reading a whole bunch of jokes about like, hey, there's all these YC Combinator things, and they're building all their code with AI. And then a whole bunch of people were joking like, yeah, now one developer can create the tech debt of 20 developers in a matter of minutes instead of months, right? So
I was going to say the joke here is like, you're now your 10x engineers are like 10x bug creators, like security vulnerability creation machines.
Exactly, right? So I mean, right now, you definitely see speed, right? Which is great, right? But, I mean, like sometimes we always talk about speed and what speed means, right? And we're like, hey, like, one like funny anecdote I like to use a lot of times is we don't put brakes on a car for our car to go slow. We put brakes on our car so our car can go fast, right? And I think from an AI perspective, it's really understanding that speed, right? Because just random speed, like you're not making progress, you're not going forward, right? You need a direction with speed in order to accomplish something. And I think that, making sure that people aren't just going fast for the sake of going fast, right? And then all of a sudden a wall pops up and they crash into it and they die. It's like, what is this proper mechanism of speed that we're going? And can security keep up? Because security doesn't usually keep up very well. And the other problem we have in security a lot of times is we really are behind on our technology knowledge and our capabilities to really keep up with and really think about some of these modern initiatives like AI, agentic AI, right? And now they're coming out in different ways like the MCP to really be able to figure out how to be able to access systems in a live manner, which now we need to worry about more, right? Now we've got client server architectures with man in the middle, right? Which is an old problem that we've had before. And are we still going to try to solve it the old fashioned way, or are we going to try to solve it in a new modern way is yet to be seen, because everybody's just figuring it out because it's also fresh and new, I think.
Yeah. The speed thing, that also lands with me too. I'm stewing on, it's great if like your engineering team can crank out 5 times as many PRs, but like if it's bad code, if it's not good, if it's not the same quality, there's a lot of like knock-on effects that have to be managed around that. So agree. You mentioned man in the middle, MCP. There's this new Google protocol, A2A now, like, trying to kind of really come up with a protocol for how agents talk to other agents. What, like, is the right way to think about this from a CISO standpoint is just like all new problems or old problems? Like when you just kind of think about an agentic AI accessing a bunch of data and performing some actions on behalf of you. At some level it's authorization of an identity, it's access to data, it's DLP, it's like it's the exact, I don't want to be like oversimplistic. A flippant view of the world is, hey, this is the same problems as we've been solving for the last 20, 30 years. Just for like slightly new patterns and form factors and ways of sort of integrating with it. Is that the right way to think about it? Or are you seeing the emergence of anything that is like just so novel or what are the new problems that are like very specific to agentic AI or AI that's like, well, we're going to have to solve this. It's going to be like a little bit different.
Yeah. I think that, if we really think about the past, you have to learn from the past, but I think we can all say that we haven't solved any of those problems from a security perspective in the past, right? So like we never actually solved them, which is part of the problem, right? We tried to solve them and we didn't do a good job. So, however, I think we do look in the past a little bit from a basic perspective and really kind of start to understand it. But then I think that, we've kind of, as the world has evolved, we've had SaaS, we've got cloud computing. I do think that other than security, there's this idea of trust that has come up with on us. And I think that thinking about trust, thinking about, multi-layered defense strategies, I think is important. I think about security, right? We think about reliability, but now I think we need to think a little bit about ethics. I think we need to think about intent, right? And I think we really need to look at it holistically when it comes to AI, right? When it comes to AI governance, when it comes to responsible AI use, when it comes to securing the infrastructure, when it comes to securing the data. I think you really need like a good holistic approach, as opposed to traditionally in security. What I think we do a lot of times is we whack-a-mole. It's a whack-a-mole. Like, okay, we got an infrastructure problem, whack-a-mole. Okay, I've got another problem that's on the data. Let me whack-a-mole the data problem. But they all correlate. And that's the problem a lot of times is everybody gets hyper-focused on one piece of the larger security issue. And then, we miss things, right? And, obviously one of the things that almost always gets missed is identity and access management, right? And controlling, how you're going to get access to stuff, how you're going to manage that access. That's always a problem, every single technology thing that security comes along to try to deal with. And we never have been able to solve the problem in a great way.
Right. And something that is exciting, it's exciting, I guess maybe a little bit scary to some degree, is that if you believe in the agentic AI explosion and you believe there's going to be some multiplicative number, some multiple factor more of agentic AI than there are human users, it's going to exacerbate that problem by that number X, right? So if it's like 10X number of identities, you get 10X the problem right there that you weren't solving before. And maybe problems that were manual and that you could kind of manage manually become untenable because they're now at scale problems. They're non-human scale problems for like an individual person to solve. You mentioned, I totally agree with you on the idea that like, yeah, we focus so much on security first and foremost, but there's all these adjacencies. In particular, you mentioned trust. And I think this is related to security, but it's like an interesting kind of implication of agentic AI is that usually these autonomous robots they're acting on behalf of people, right?
Yep.
If you assume that people are going to be able to spin up agentic AI on their behalf and do like work on their behalf. So how does that work? Like, that seems like it's going to tear at the fabric of a lot of security tools, a lot of technology tools. Like, how do I know that Alex 123 that was looking through PRs and, it's like that this version of me is like authorized to do the right thing, that I'm managing lifecycle around it appropriately, that they have right access to data. There's this like sort of trust aspect to it in addition to the security aspect of it. And I guess, what do you think about all that?
Oh, I mean, I think there's lots of interesting answers here, right? Like, I think that, there's the old trust but verify. There's the old zero trust, type of mindset. But I think that from a trust perspective, right? Like, you have to think about trust in layers. You even have to think about trust as a multidimensional model, right? So where you kind of think about the security aspects, and security could be access control, right? How to deal with secrets, how to deal with multi-tenancy, how to deal with the ability to make sure that you do segregation very well. Observability, right? Like we talked about, like, how do you know what people are doing, right? Well, we need to make sure that we really have great telemetry and logging and really be able to understand what things are doing and why they're doing it. So in case something bad happens, we can figure it out. We're going to have governance. Everything needs a little bit of governance. Everything needs rules, because there's certain things that we'll want AI to do or not do, right? Like there might be certain questions we don't want certain people to get the answers to, right? We definitely need high levels of reliability, I think, from a trust perspective, right? I think reliability and availability go hand in hand. And then I think that right now, I think where we're at now and even where we're going, like I don't see, and we joked a little bit earlier about the, now we've got to one developer that can create the tech debt of 10 in half the time. There's got to be human oversight, right? So whether it's approval flows or kill switches or, circuit mechanisms that do validations, I just don't see how right now, and even in the immediate future, how we really get past some kind of human validation that things are correct. I mean, even when the data is good, there's still, like we talked about, things are going to emerge. The type of data, the quality of the data, the amount of data you have, the way the LLM learned it. I mean, it's still software, still can have bugs, right? Like there's still going to need to be a human in the loop somewhere, some way. I think anybody who's saying like, oh, we're not going to need humans in the loop, like I think they definitely, are a little bit too sci-fi.
They're a little too down the path on that Black Mirror journey. I do agree with you on the human oversight though. To me, it feels much more like AI will make people a lot more productive, 5x, 6x, 10x more productive. But like you still need a human in the loop, at least for the foreseeable future. Because at the end of the day, it is just an algorithm. It's not thinking. It's math, right? It's like using algorithms and matrices to calculate answers effectively. And we can get better at kind of like the reasoning models and things like that. But I'm curious what that means for like, it feels like human oversight, particularly for sensitive operations, is like the right move long term.
Yeah. And it'll be super interesting, I think, because the AI is learning from data in which humans create and learning from the actions of humans. What happens when the humans stop having creativity and individual thought? And that's all we do is allow AI to create content that creates content that creates content that creates content. You have to think that there has to be a cap on things if we get so lazy as humans that we rely on AI to do everything. We're going to get dumber, right? There's going to be less original content. There's going to be less creativity because we're going to get lazy and want AI to help us make everything go faster. So I don't know. I do worry about that from just ethical perspective and from just a human perspective, that when I watch everybody just try to use AI to do everything, it kind of dumbs people down and they kind of forget like how things work and why things operate a certain way.
And it actually makes me think that the real value in the future, like what people would get paid for is like artisanal things, right? Like things where you really put a lot of thought into it, or like handcrafted goods. like actually seeing a physical doctor will cost a fortune because anybody can go see like an AI doctor and it's like, the cost approaches zero at some level, but it's like really seeing a human being is like going to be the expense. That's like the true sign of wealth in the future.
So you just made me think. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Idiocracy.
Yeah.
But I get a little flash of that every now and then when I hear people talking about using AI to do everything and no human in the loop. I was like, let me guess.
You water your grass with Gatorade because it's got electrolytes as well.
Totally. Oh man, the future is, I don't even know what to think. It's gonna be wild. I'm stewing on the human on the loop stuff in particular, and just thinking about like, what does that mean for how people work? Maybe this is a little bit existential on like the ethical side, but how do people sort of like on ramp into their careers when they're like not maybe great at a job yet, where AI can do like something that's like not particularly great, like 95%, but really like expertise to come in and do it super well. And sort of like, how does that give people an opportunity to like learn the ropes?
I don't know. It's scary. I was reading this one article. I mean, people have been taking interviews for jobs, kind of using AI off to the screen. But they were showing some AI where people were they had the AI deepfake look like the person, and the AI was answering the questions that the interviewer was asking while the other person was like in the back taking a nap or whatever. Then you show up to work and you just keep using AI. I mean, how long could somebody stay employed by using AI and a deepfake to get a job, continuing to use AI until, eventually, like I said, you're going to run out of AI and somebody's going to figure it out. But boy, you could probably get away with it for a while, I bet.
Yeah. The problem though, to your point is, if AI is like 80% good at things, 90% good at things, like, well, that 10%, you still got to solve it, right? I had a buddy, he described it as AI does jobs kind of like when you ask your sixth grader to do it. It's like it comes back and it kind of seems okay, but when you look close, like it's not great. There's like some problems in it. And I think it's like better at some things, obviously, than other things. But, we see it even like we use Cursor internally and code writing tools and things like that. It's like at certain tasks with certain structures, it can do things relatively well. But, it still feels like we got a little ways to go to like really get the tools to where they need to be to like make things like awesome or 99% or like 100%. Totally. I just don't think we're there yet.
No. Yeah. I think the tighter you can make the guardrails or the better you can make the prompt, right, the better results that you're going to get.
And it's inputs too. I mean, that's the other thing that we're seeing is the structure of the inputs dictate a lot of how well it can operate. It's like, how structured is your code base? Is your code base structured in a way where like incrementally you can ask it to perform certain tasks and certain things? It can get really good at it. Whereas, for other structures that are across multiple files or when it's like a little bit like more on a struggle bus. So that's going to even push on probably like how kind of businesses are organized in a weird way. Like if you kind of abstract that, it's like, well, how do we organize our content? How do we organize our SEO? How do we organize our code? What are the ways that we're kind of making that intuitive so that AI can be the most effective? Like that's probably an opportunity, but that's going to take a lot of like rejiggering for a lot of existing companies.
Yeah, it's very interesting, but there's a lot of companies down the path because I do know that like if you think about like there was this big talk about everybody wanted to democratize data, right? Make data available for everybody in the company so the company could get access to the data, move quicker, throw BI tools on top of it, right? So, we just look at AI as like a smart BI tool, right? And getting people access to the data and helping, AI, read the data, interpret the data, help you move quicker, is a great use case. But, you still have to have some smart people understanding if it's interpreting the data correctly, because what ends up happening, if you've been in technology long enough like me, like I've never been to any company in the world where their data wasn't a mess on the back end.
Totally.
In, right? So, that ends up being the biggest problem.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. It's right. It's going to be interesting to see, is the rate limiter of the AI adoption, AI technology and primitives like MCP and authorization and all these ways of like kind of building agentic AI, or is it going to be like some structural thing that people don't understand yet, like availability of data, how we organize our code bit, like these kind of things that are just structurally preventing the technology from being as effective as it possibly could be. My guess is, to your point, it actually ends up being that. It ends up being like data authorization, data access, code base structure, some of those types of things.
Totally, especially when you see a lot of these really customized applications like a Salesforce or something where every customer totally customizes Salesforce to its own need. Like, how do you get I mean, maybe you still have to dump all the data out of Salesforce to tie your AI to it, and something like an MCP might not work very good, or you have to create customized MCPs per application, which gets kind of crazy.
Yeah. Do you think, I don't know, do you have any like raw or evolving thoughts on MCP and some of the A2A stuff? Just in terms of MCP feels to me like agent native APIs, but kind of fundamentally still just APIs at the end of the day, just a different way of like accessing them and using them, which is interesting, but not like mind blowing, but it's great that we have a protocol for it. Yeah. I guess, what do you think about all these new protocols and standards that are starting to come out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super interesting, right? I mean, and this is why, I don't think we can take a look at, some of the protocols by themselves, right? But I do think when you start taking the way that we dealt things on the past, right? I mean, MCP is definitely a bunch of APIs for sure, right? Talking to a bunch of other APIs, right? So I do think that there is that interesting capability, right? But now when you start looking at MCPs and you start looking at the other protocols that are coming into place, you start really being able to provide that bridge, that middleware capability that really starts tying things together and tying things together quickly. And it's going to tie together things that are trusted. It's going to tie together things that are untrusted. It's really going to create, I think, a lot of complications. And it's going to be a great attack vector for bad guys, and a great way for good guys to make mistakes when it comes to moving data from a data exfiltration perspective. I think we're going to see lots of issues from identity and access management, right? Because every one of these agents is going to need access to a thing that's going to need access to a thing that's going to need access to a thing. How do you deal with that, right? We're going to have typical stuff like insecure configurations, I think, are going to be issues. But, I do think there'll be some new things as well, where like I'm starting to hear this topic that's called like tool poisoning, where people are intentionally trying to corrupt the data models and corrupt the data and corrupt the thinking of the LLM, right? So there's these kind of poisoning attacks that people are looking at. And, if you get access to these MCPs and, especially with some of these other ones that are trying to create like, these MCPs for MCPs, right? This way to be able to, these agents to talk to these APIs and these other agents to talk to agents, and you can get in the middle of those flows. It feels like it could be like what is the problem? Is like, how do you figure out what the problem is? Is it the data? Is somebody in the middle? Did somebody write bad code? Like it just gets crazy, I think.
Well, oh man, there's so many things to that. Cause like take the tool poisoning as an example. I guess that pulls on issues like kind of your code supply chain effectively. Like how are you integrating with other technologies? How do you know that they're not going to have something that gets put into their agentic AI that spits out? Like you could effectively hack someone by being like an upstream MCP of that service, right? Or are people accepting the risk and just being like, oh, we'll figure it out as we go? Or do you think that's making people more cautious to adopt the technologies in the short term?
I mean, I think right now, like as of today, like I think like this month, there's like tons of new specs coming out from a security perspective, right? Like somebody wrote a spec to use OAuth 2.1 as your authorization protocol for it, right? And then, OAuth isn't the most secure protocol in the world and was kind of designed for hardware devices, not really for software in general anyways. And even with APIs, OAuth had lots of issues. So now they're going to try to implement OAuth, as an authorization mechanism for it, right? So there's just going to be tons of holes there, right? Because we're taking an older technology, right, from an OAuth. I mean, 2.1's newer, I guess, but an older way of thinking and applying it to a new way of doing work. And there's going to be gaps, right? And I'm sure that the people that are implementing OAuth or recommending OAuth be used from an MCP perspective and implementing it into the MCP kind of design probably don't really know how OAuth works anyways, right? Which is going to create, tons more issues on how it works. So, I mean, everything is just evolving really, really quickly. I've seen a bunch of articles pop out on how to secure an MCP. Seeing articles pop out on how to build a secure MCP. So like we're in the very early days of it, right now.
It's so Wild West. And then you've still got the issue of end users kind of YOLO adding, and like say you're building some agentic AI and you authorize a bunch of MCP servers. Like you're still assuming that those servers are, like good servers and they're they should have access to the data that you're authorizing them to have access to.
Yeah. And in your system, right? Because this is a client server technology. So if you're using an agent, like how is it on your system? Like, are you using like Cloud Desktop? Like, are you using like what kind of, agent thing are you using that's talking to a server someplace or talking to an upstream server or talking to a server in the middle? So now we have to secure the host. Also, we have to secure the service bus, the thing, because everybody's going to put something in front of the MCP, right? Somebody's going to throw an API gateway there. You're going to throw a secure proxy server capability, right? And then you're going to have to, figure out how to create authentication flows from your client on your desktop to the server in the MCP, and then from the MCP or from whatever tertiary thing to whatever third party you need to access, whether it's a data, or whether it's a data warehouse, or whether it's a SaaS application, or whether it's a homegrown, home-built thing that you just want to pull some data out of. It gets very complex to be able to run it in a secure way in the enterprise, especially right now, because the whole idea of the MCP from Anthropic, that's only a couple months. What is that? 3 months old?
Yeah, it's like 2 months old or something.
Yeah,
it feels like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. And even when it came out, I don't think it had an authorizations back end. And I know that they're
that's brand new. Came out like a couple weeks ago or like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. So okay. So given all those things, maybe this is just like a parting thought here, but what should I'm definitely feeling optimistic. I think all about the AI space and agentic AI and all that it means for identity and access. It's all the things you talk about, right? Like it's going to pull on a lot of these problems, but I think it is a cool and exciting world that we're going to, that where these technologies are going to enable people to move faster, build quicker, be more effective, and so forth.
Totally.
But in the short term, worlds, it's moving quickly. What's the advice for security leaders or IT leaders today, on a time horizon of like next 3 months? Like what should people be thinking about, worrying about, starting to kind of like explore?
Yeah. I think that, definitely stay relevant, stay current on the technology, right? And then, figure out like a good kind of mechanism to really kind of understand, what can be run in your environment. Can it be trusted? Right. So, I think the most important thing is when people want to run agents, like really understand what the agent is, really understand what the scope and the capability of it is, right? Because some agents are going to do very small tasks. Some are going to do large tasks. So like make sure you're scoping the things correctly, right? So you're never going to get around security and permissions, right? So make sure that you're really thinking about zero trust principles, making sure you're thinking about how to deal with secrets, making sure you're thinking about telemetry and logging. Really start to make sure that you're thinking about those things. And as a security professional, those are the areas generally that we focus on. But also think about, kind of behavior, right? So think about, making sure that you can validate that the agents are doing what the agents are supposed to be doing from a behavioral perspective, right? Because I think now we have to start validating that things are doing what they're doing. I think testing and validating, right? So we're never getting around, the ability to, red team things, right? QA things deeply, right? Like make sure, try to break the thing, right? Make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do, right? Because now we're talking about new things, right? Like prompt injection, right? Like how do we make sure that the prompts are working? We talked about poisoning, right? Data poisoning. There's going to be all kinds of edge cases that are going to emerge, as we talked about earlier, that you don't know about, right? So we got to be testing and validating, not just from a security perspective, but from a business perspective to make sure it does what it's supposed to do. And then also from a engineering perspective, that it was written and operates the way that it was supposed to. I do think that when we talk about agents too, we're going to have, we call it zero trust. We can call it whatever, but we're going to have boundaries and guardrails, right? We want to limit, we don't want to limit the task, right? We want to limit, data types. You want to limit, decision domains, right? And this is why we think that we'll have a lot of agents as we start to limit these things, understand the prompt, understand, making sure that we can create good guardrails and good segmentation. Human in the loop, right? I wouldn't let anybody do anything without a human in the loop, and make sure that it's really understood, that the human is there to validate and make sure it can get there. And then we're just going to have to learn, I think, right? I think we just have to create this continuous process of learning, evolving, and coming up with new ways in which we secure things in a smarter in a smarter, better, more effective way than we've done in the past, right? Like learn from the past, but let's not repeat the past, right? Let's repeat pieces of the past, but let's do it in a better, more effective way. I would think if you're a security person, like those are kind of what I'd want to do, right? Because I mean, security has got to be continuous, right? So we always have to have this kind of continuous evaluation loop, right? You never did it and are done, right? You did it and then you have to do it again or make sure it's working, right? So
I love this. I love the call out of testing. It's hilarious because we rolled out this. I mean, they rolled out this AI tool for HR last all hands, and like immediately everyone's trying to like trick it to giving us like Blake's social security number and stuff like that. But it really does. It turns like every person in your company into a red teamer effectively. Yeah. You're just like your interface is like a chat interface or some basic input or something like that. And everyone's going to try to hack it, which is kind of cool and kind of fun. But also it just means like, man, if you've got like data access problems or governance problems or something like those are really going to be gnarly, and the hackers are going to figure it out too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just human nature, right? We all want to be like, oh, I wonder what information I can learn. Like, let me see what I can.
Yeah, totally. Kevin, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. It was a good chat on all things AI, and looking forward to, we'll have to do an episode with me, you, and Paul, where we dive deep on agentic AI.
Yeah, it'd be fun. Thanks for having me, Alex. This was a lot of fun.
Man. See you, buddy. Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in. This episode of All Aboard is brought to you by the team at ConductorOne. We'd love to hear your feedback. Send us a message at allaboard@conductorone.com. Until next time.